Okay, so far with this model, kind of built it out most of the way here, and looking at it from the orthographic view, you can see here, oops, that I closed up the nostril, the eyes, and the mouth, and also use the soft selection tool just to kind of begin shaping this a little bit. Just to kind of make it so when we bring it into either Mudbox or ZBrush, more of the facial features will be where we want it. And so in this tutorial, I'm going to go over how to make a complex ear here. Keep in mind that if you're using a stylized character, I would recommend not doing what I'm showing in this tutorial because it's a little bit complicated, because again, the earlobe is it's a really complicated shape there. But if you look at most stylized characters, you just have like an extrusion for the ear and then just one extrusion for the inner ear there. So again, I just recommend that you select some faces here. Let me make sure soft selection is turned off. And extrude it out and get your ear that way. Let's see here. And so the earlobe is a pretty complicated shape here though, and so watching this tutorial can be really helpful in following along, because I feel like if you can model an earlobe, you can model just about anything here using this technique. So this is the same approximate technique that I use for modeling cars, for instance, and so I'm going to demonstrate an ear, but this technique carries over to a lot of different things here. So what I'm going to do, and so the ear I'm going to model separately, and then I'm going to combine it to the rest of this model. So I'm just going to hide my model here just by pressing H on the keyboard, and you'll see that they're grayed out here in the outliner. So if you want to bring them back, you just press it in the outliner and then press H, and then you can bring it back that way. So I'm just hiding them out of the way, and I'm going to start working on the ear. And so the basic concept I'm going to use for modeling the ear is, since it's such a complicated shape, I'm going to model it from a flat two-dimensional shape and then model it out into a 3D shape. And that's a little bit different than the head, where we started with just a box and did kind of a box modeling technique. So this is kind of the other main technique for modeling complex objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a plane. So this button right here, press F to focus in, and I will scale it up, dragging the center box from left to right just to kind of get it a little bigger so I can see it. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the attribute editor, and then the third tab, this is polyplane 1. And I want to take the subdivision width and height down to 1. So I just want it to be one box here. So just one subdivision on each side there. Keep it real simple here. And so a key component of this concept of modeling is work with as little geometry as humanly possible for as long as you can, and then add the subdivisions in later. Let's see here. So I'm going to use this reference image, my side view. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees so that it faces parallel to the side view. So I press E on my keyboard to rotate, and then I hold down J, and that'll lock it into 15-degree increments until you reach 90 right there. So J is a really helpful shortcut there. And what I'm going to do, so I'll press W, and I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to scale it back down. And I'm going to turn off X-ray so you can see this a little better. So, shoot, I'm going to actually need it. So, X-ray on, right-click and vertex, and I'm going to shape it. So I just kind of positioned it there, and now I'm going to right-click and go to vertex, and I'm going to shape the vertices, and it's going to become clear. Let me just move these vertices real quick. Oh, I have symmetry on. That's throwing me off. Make sure that symmetry is off in the modeling toolkit right here. we do not want or need symmetry for this step. So I'm going to position it like that on the earlobe. And before I get started at modeling this, I'm going to mainly be using the side view as my reference, like almost entirely. But I'm just going to press spacebar and then spacebar again. And you see I can find that green object right there in the center. I'm just going to drag it out so that I can kind of at least loosely use this front reference as well, just because you see the ear, it's not a flat object. There's going to be some three-dimensionality to it, kind of pulling out from the front view as well. But again, I'm going to mainly use the side view for this. And so the key concept here is I'm going to extrude edges. So remember, whenever you use the extrude tool, you're either going to be extruding faces or edges. And so edges is really useful for modeling when you're doing these when you're modeling these flat shapes here, like this. And so we're going to model this using a plane, and we'll, towards the end, you'll kind of see how this becomes a 3D object here as we move along. But again, just almost pretending like this is just like we're tracing on a 2D piece of paper here. I'm going to trace this outer earlobe and make an edge loop out of this. And take a careful note of how I position the edges and kind of how many edges I use to make this. Notice that I don't use too many subdivisions when I'm extruding around this thing. So I'm going to use the extrude button with that edge selected right there. And I'll press Q after I'm done extruding, and then I'll just use vertex to kind of shape this out. So I extruded it once for this kind of 45-degree angle here. Oops. To create this edge. This was my initial edge. And then I have like more of a 90-degree edge for the top there. Then I'm going to extrude this edge. No need to go into the world view mode. Or sorry, no need to worry about this button right here. The world versus local kind of power button at the top of the extrude tool. The default's fine here, I believe. Let me just check what I'm saying there. Yep. So as long as you're extruding from the orthographic view, when you extrude it shouldn't pull out in the I guess in left to right like this, looking at the front view. It should kind of stay flat as long as you kind of keep your view in this side view here. So I have another edge right here that I created for that kind of the earlobe there. Extrude again. I'll press Q to get out of it, and then W just to kind of move the edge around. And then I'll right click and go to vertex just to continue to shape these. And my philosophy on this, or one of my philosophies on this, is that we can always add subdivisions later, and it's really easy, you know. So working with as few subdivisions as possible during this stage is going to just it's going to result in a better model, and it's going to also make your life easier in the process here. So it's kind of a win-win here. So I'm going to extrude this again and bring it down to maybe about this point right here where my cursor is. Extrude again. Press Q to get out of it just to make sure I don't extrude twice by mistake or something like that. I'll press Q, right click, and go to Vertex Mode. I kind of like to I like to position these in Vertex Mode when I'm in this flat shape. And you see there's some curve there that's not being accounted for, and there could be another edge loop here. I'll kind of finish this thing off and then decide in a moment. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and add it. So here, I'm going to go to Mesh Tools and break off that menu because I like to use the insert. I like to, when I'm adding edge loops, I'll either use the insert edge loop tool or the multi-cut tool, depending on what I'm trying to do here. I kind of want this to be a rounded edge, so I'm going to try the insert edge loop tool. See how well that works. See how it just kind of just by chance, since I knew it was going to round out, it just jumped it right into the perfect position there. So I added an edge loop there, just to give this a little more definition. So moving right along here, I'm going to select this edge again at the edge, extrude, press Q, and then I'll kind of drag the vertices to kind of get it. Notice here, this is actually really important. You see how all these edges, I'm going to select the edges that I'm referring to. All these edges right here, they're kind of facing into the ear. And any vertice that you see on the outside has an edge connected to it that's pointing towards the center of the ear. This is a really important habit to get into in terms of topological flow, and just to help keep your model clean here, because the shape of the ear, once this gets smoothed out, these edge loops are prominent in the shape of the ear, and so having that flow makes it so that when you smooth this out, it'll look better. Is the general idea there. So I'll keep this in normal shaded mode. I'm going to select this edge right here. I'm going to extrude it up to maybe this point right here where my cursor is. Oops. Well, we're going to add subdivisions here to further define this thing. Okay, so I just brought it to that point. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of X-ray so you can see this a little bit better. I'm going to use the bridge tool. Instead of extruding this again and kind of like snapping vertices together right here, I'm going to just use the bridge tool to connect this edge right here with this edge right here. So shift select both of those edges and then press bridge in your modeling toolkit right underneath extrude. So if you press that, it kind of just closes off the gap here. And we can add some more edge loops into that if we want, but now we have this basic edge loop going around the ear. And so we have it from the side view, and so now it's good just to check the front view and shape it up a little bit. And so the way I do that is I'll select this face right here, and I'm just going to go over to the front view, and I'll press W, and I'll just move it in a little bit. The front view on mine is not going to totally line up, and I kind of trust the side view a little bit more on this, but I'm just kind of using this reference is like more of like a broad guide right now. And so I can see that if I go into 2 view, that the face that I have selected here is kind of that the front of the earlobe, and you can see on her head that's further towards her nose, towards the center of her head. And then as we get out to this area out here, it gets further out. And so one thing that can be helpful here is going into edge mode and moving these can save you a little bit of time. But I'm just positioning it a little bit so that there's a little bit of that three-dimensionality to the shape. And this is really important to do. A common mistake that I see is someone will, and it's a logical thing to think, so definitely no blame on people for doing this because it makes sense, but it kind of gets a little hairy with Maya's workflow, is they'll kind of trace this ear perfectly from the side view and then say like, hey, I'm gonna shape this in 3 dimensions later. But it just gets a little hard to do that. It gets a little overwhelming because more and more geometry is going to be added here, and it's much easier to be shaping this in 3 dimensions now when there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 faces that you have to shape, rather than when you have 200 faces you need to shape, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. And so this is a good opportunity just to get yourself started on the right foot. And I like to kind of shape this using the edge mode because it'll just grab 2 vertices at a time for you and just save you a little bit of hassle here. But you can grab vertices, faces. It's up to you how you want to do that. Okay, so going back to my side view. So again, you can kind of see the shape I made there. All I did was I just, with the inner ear right here, I kind of kept it in. And then the section out here that I have highlighted kind of comes out a little bit further. And it just kind of depends on the ear that you're modeling too. The ears can be very different from person to person. Okay, so that's the outer earlobe that we just created there. And so if you feel your ear, there's like a, there's a crease that happens there, which we'll worry about in a moment. But then you have this main kind of lobe that kind of circles around here. So this is going to be the next section that we worry about. And so I'm going to connect, I'm going to move this edge down just a little bit because I want this edge to become this, like the starting point for that lobe. And then this edge. So you see how this edge, if I pulled it out, it would kind of start to make that shape a little bit. And then this edge, if I started to pull it out, I would kind of start to make that shape a little bit. So what I'm going to do is right click and make sure I'm in edge mode, then hold down shift. I'm going to shift and select these edges. And it doesn't matter, you don't need to have the exact number of edges going around your ear as I do, but it is important that you see how this edge ends kind of where that earlobe section starts, and then this edge ends right where that earlobe starts. That's really the main thing you need to kind of pay attention to here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this and pull it inwards. So to kind of make that edge flow right there. So I'll extrude, and then I'm going to try, so in my case, grabbing the green arrow and pulling it in kind of starts to get the shape. We're going to have to drag vertices and shape this thing a lot. So you don't try to get this perfect or anything in this step, but just kind of use the extrude tool to kind of pull out that geometry, if that makes sense. So again, just with that edge loop selected right here, I'll just press extrude, and I don't worry about going into world mode, I don't think. I'm just going to do the green arrow, and then in this case I'm just going to drag it in just to kind of start to get that extruded into position. I want to just check my perspective view. Okay, I'm just kind of checking that. So we're mainly staying in this side view for now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go clockwise from the top and position these vertices here, starting with this vertice right here, my first vertice that was extruded. And so that one doesn't change too much. But then the second vertice right here, I'm going to pull it in. And I'm just going to, one by one, shape these vertices. At first that vertice looks crazy and diagonal, but just keep in mind we're also dragging these others in as we move down clockwise here. So it begins to flow a little more naturally as you kind of move along here. So I'm just going clockwise, vertice to vertice. And the reason I go clockwise, you can also go counterclockwise, or you can go randomly if you want. But the reason I go clockwise is that it just helps me stay organized, and especially if I'm doing something a little more complicated. Sometimes I can get lost if I don't do that. And then I'll kind of go back around and do touch-ups. Also notice that if you see, I have the move tools here, and I'm grabbing from the center when I'm in the orthographic view, but when I'm in the perspective view, I never, ever, ever grab it in the center here. Always, if you're in the perspective view over here, and you grab it in the center, it's just always, that one worked all right, but it's very unpredictable. I feel like Maya should just not even make that an option, honestly. Like in the perspective view, you should only want to ever move this way, because Maya's perspective will just play tricks on your mind. Is kind of what will happen there. But again, grabbing it from the center is fine in the orthographic view because I can drag it up and left to right, but then front to back in the orthographic view is locked up. So whenever I grab it from the center point in the orthographic view, I know where those things going. So sorry about the tangent here. One thing also to keep in mind is this move tool. You notice when I'm going from like this vertex to that one, I press Q to kind of get rid of the move tool for a second, and then press W right next to it just to kind of pull it back. So that's just a helpful way to kind of move along your selections and get those arrows out of the way. Okay, so I positioned it like this. The edge that was extruded was kind of making, you know, that shape right there. And I'll go out of X-ray just so you can kind of see what's happening a little bit better there. One change I might make here, just make an adjustment. So I'll just angle that out a little bit more. Just want to make sure the topology flows all right. And you see how all these edges are kind of flowing in to the center there. Okay, so now that I've extruded that, I'm just going to check my my front view. Whenever I make a new edge loop, I just try to check both views and kind of check my progress. So in my case, this vertex, I might just pull it in a touch. I'm going to try to kind of just use the reference image here to help inform me how I should be kind of shaping this. And again, in my front view, it's not tracing, you know, it's just, but it is there for reference, which is nice. And this edge right here, I can tell I need to just pull out a little bit. Do you see that? So in the perspective view, it was here, that lobe was kind of going in. And so I just selected that edge, or you can right click and select two vertices like this. Either way works. Press W and then I'm just moving it out a little bit just to kind of mimic this shape a little bit better. Okay, so we're to this point, and I'm going to switch back to my side view. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add an edge loop right here that'll help create this extrusion between this earlobe. So right now, this face is very connected to that face up there, etc. You know, going kind of along the ear. And so if I select these interfaces right here and extrude, or not, I'm not extrude, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Create an edge loop here. It'll help kind of break out that geometry when it comes time to kind of smooth it and all that stuff. So I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loop and just click on this edge right here. If you can see where the green dotted line is, and drag it in. And in the side view, I'm actually going to redraw that. I'm going to get it a little closer. And then Q, right click, vertex. So I press Q to get out of the Insert Edge Loop tool to make sure that I'm not drawing in multiple edge loops by mistake. And I'm just going to shape this a little bit. It looks mainly all right in there. Next up, I'm just going to select all these faces right here. So inside that edge loop right there, press W. I'll just push them in a little bit towards the center. So it's the right arrow. If you're looking at it from the front view, you see I'm just pushing in a little bit just to separate out that earlobe from the inner lobe here. So I'll go back to Object Mode. And so one thing to keep in mind when you're modeling this way is if we're in one mode, and if you press 3, you get a preview of what this thing's going to look like when it's smooth. So I'm kind of getting an idea here what this will look like when it's smooth. It still needs some work, but it's kind of, you can kind of see where this is going a little bit, hopefully. Press 1 again to kind of get out of that. So looking at the ear, I'm going to hide my model for a second. We have this outer lobe right here, which we shaped. Then we have this main lobe, which we just shaped. But you can see here, the next one that's up is this lobe that kind of comes in like that, where my cursor is. So that's the next one we're going to do. So we're going to do that one next. So I'm going to unhide my ear, and I'm going to save real quick, just in case this computer crashes. And what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to look mainly in the side view, and I am going to use, this time I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. And so I'll hold Control, and I'm going to add an edge loop right here, where that is. Right click, Vertex, and I'll press Q too. I press Q just to make sure I got out of that. Shape it just a tiny bit. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extrude this to kind of start to make that inner lobe shape right there. So right click and go to Edge. And so this is important to kind of follow along with. I'm going to turn off X-ray for a second so you can see hopefully a little better. So I'm selecting that edge right there and this edge right there. So shift select both of those edges. So again, this edge right here, this highlighted green, and this tiny edge right in there, this highlighted green. Because looking at the ear, this lobe kind of curves and morphs into this shape right here. And so by selecting both of those edges and extruding, that's going to help make the shape correctly. So I'll extrude. And I might need to press this world button right here in the top right before I start pulling on this thing. And I'll just kind of get into a basic shape and then press Q to get out of that. Then I'm going to go to Vertex Mode and just start shaping this thing a little bit. So I'm going to select these two vertices and then just drag them down a little. Then I'll drag and select this vertex and drag it up some. Those two I'm kind of keeping as a pair right there. So I'll go back to X-ray so you can kind of see that a little bit. And on this, I can right click on Vertex. I can just, the lobe kind of like curves out and spreads out here, so it kind of gets a little thicker here. So we pull into the lobe there. So I'm going to just check this from the perspective view now. So I'll select this vertex and press F just to kind of zoom in on this section. Okay. So you can kind of see the extrusion I just made was right there. And so we're going to work on that inner lobe there some more. So I'll right click and go to Edges and go back to my side view. So it's these two edges we're going to extrude again. So I'll extrude again. This time, yeah, I need to go into the world mode again. Or, yeah, it doesn't really matter. So I'll go into the world view. Again, this power button in the top right when you press extrude is what I mean when I say world view. And so it just drags, when you make an extrusion with that pressed, it drags the extrusion on the XYZ axis rather than by default it's local, where it just drags out in the direction that the edge is already facing. And so I'm just going to pull it to that point from the side view. Then I'll check my perspective view. And I think, feeling this, that it's starting to kind of go a little too deep there. So I'm just going to grab these and I'm going to drag it from left to right to kind of pull it back towards the rest of that ear shape. Then I'll shift select these two edges. Just pull those just a tiny bit from the left to the right. You might not need to do this on your model, you know, it's just kind of depends on the shape of your ear and what decisions you've kind of made on this thing so far. And so those two lobes are kind of the main shapes of the ear. So, you know, these faces right here that are kind of going around this, and then this inner lobe right here, those are kind of like the tricky shapes And so from this point, we're kind of working about the inner ear and the back of the ear. And so it's just going to be a matter of like connecting all this stuff back up. And then from there, just kind of doing the extrusions on the outer ear to make this ear 3-dimensional rather than 2-dimensional. So we need to close this thing up, kind of get it watertight from the front. So that's kind of the next step that's coming up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this edge again. So extrude, and you notice I'm not even really with this one. I'm going to change it to the world mode. The side view is not super helpful for me on this one. I'm kind of, what this is where this lobe starts to kind of connect in with this outer lobe. So I'm going to kind of connect them up. That's kind of the main idea here. And so what I'm going to need to do is, so I extruded it to kind of just get that out right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it to this. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create an edge loop because I have 2 edges that I want to connect to one here. So I'm going to do Insert Edge Loop Tool, and I'm just going to divide up. I'm going to subdivide that right there. And so it's this outer loop wherever that it kind of comes closest to that inner loop right there. So I'm just going to divide it in half by doing the edge loop, Insert Edge Loop. Snap it in. It looks like it kind of placed it perfectly without me having to really do anything. And so now I'm going to connect these two up. So connecting 2 pieces of geometry, this is the same object right now, so I don't need to combine this. But so if you have 2 entirely different pieces of geometry, there's usually 3 steps where you need to select both objects in object mode and combine them using this button right here, which we don't need to do right now. Then we'll snap vertices and then merge the vertices. So that's step 2 and 3. So we only need to do steps 2 and 3 here, which is snap the vertices and then merge them. So I'm going to go into Vertex Mode. I'm going to select that vertice right there. That's the top vertice on the inner ear loop. And I'll press W or this button right here so that I can move it around. And I'm not even worrying about getting it into the perfect position because I'm going to snap it to the position of this vertice right here of the outer lobe. So to do that, you press V as in vampire, and so just hold down V and then snap it. And then right now, it looks like it snapped into position, and it did. You see how that vertice jumped from back here. It was back here. Then I held down V and then snapped it, and it just goes right over to that other vertice. And so that's great. And it looks like they're the same vertice, but they're not welded together yet. So you see they're in the same place, but they're not connected. They're not glued together. So in order to glue them together, you just need to drag and select like that and select both vertices. It doesn't work if you just click it. You need to do like a drag and select exactly like that to make sure that both vertices get selected because there's 2 vertices there that we need to merge together. And then press this merge button right here where my cursor is. You can also go to Edit Mesh and Merge and find that same button right there. So you merge. This little distance threshold menu will show up, just kind of saying, hey, we merged it kind of thing. I'll press Q to get out of it. And I'll just do 1, 2, 3 with doing that same thing. So I'm going to go to the second in the middle vertice of the inner lobe right there. And I have it in move mode right there, or the W button. And then I'll hold down V as in vampire and then snap it right there. And then drag and select and merge them together. Same thing here. So press W, then V, drag and select, and merge. So that process starts to get really quick when you get used to it here. So you can see here that the inner lobe's starting to kind of shape up right here. And so kind of looking at it at an ear here, I think the next thing I need to do just have to think about this carefully, is I'm going to do, oh yeah, no, that's not going to work. So I'm going to select this edge loop, this going around this inner ear right here that we kind of formed. Sorry that I was just kind of talking to myself before there. So it's, just had to think through the best way to do this. So I'm going to select this edge loop right here and make sure that this little edge is selected here. You see how this is an edge and then an edge there. So make sure this one right here gets selected as well. So there's a full edge loop on that inner ear. We're kind of doing the top one first. And then I'll extrude the whole thing. And here, let's try the this is a tricky one. Let's see. I'm just experimenting with this till I find the one that'll be the most helpful to you all. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the blue arrow to kind of pull it in. So you see here that it kind of extruded it and fanned it out. Let me try world mode. Okay. That was a tricky one. So I selected that edge loop and I'm going to extrude, and then I'll press the power button in the top right to bring it into world mode rather than local mode. Local mode was making it kind of fan out in the opposite direction that I wanted. It was just getting a little bit messy for my taste. So I'll press the power button. And then in my case, it's going to be the red arrow, or the arrow that kind of brings it in towards her nose, you know, kind of inward there. I'll just bring it in a little bit. Don't need to go crazy with it. And I'll press Q to get out of that extrude. And so from here, what I'm going to do is the next step is I'm going to press R on my keyboard, or press the scale button right here. And then it's this green box right here. You can see that this thing is just a little diagonal for my taste. So I'm just going to square that up a little bit using that green box. You don't have to do that. But I'm going to use the scale tool with the whole edge loop selected, and then the rotate tool just to kind of, and I'll scale it in here. You see what I'm doing there? Like, I'm trying to just scale it and position it in so that we roughly get that shape of the between your earlobes up top. So this kind of section right here where my cursor is. And so once I get the basic shape, there's only so much I can do with the whole edge loop selected. So from here, I'll press Q, right click vertex, and this will be a little tricky, but I'm just going to do a little bit of positioning here. I think before I do anything here, I need another edge loop right here. So I'm going to press Object Mode. I'm going to try the Insert Edge Loop tool, see if this works. Yep. So I want an edge loop right here. So once you have this thing shaped, so again, I selected that whole edge loop that was right here. You know, that what was this edge loop, and I extruded it, and then I just pulled it in so that it would kind of go inwards and scale in. And I think I need another. This is a very big face right here compared to these other ones, and there's some shaping that needs to happen there. So I'm going to add an edge loop right here. And again, the edge loop tool helps me out by kind of basically just doing that correctly. And I'm not going to need to make too many adjustments to that. And so from here, with the rest of the shape right here, it's going to be similar to when we closed off the eyes, the nose, and the mouth on the rest of the model to kind of make it watertight. So I'm going to shift and select that edge loop and make sure the whole edge loop is selected there. And I'll see if the bridge button works. It probably won't. Oh, look, it did. Okay, so the bridge tool worked. And so that's great. So that's now watertight. So you can kind of see what's happening there. And I'll press 3 on my keyboard so I can kind of see the ear starting to take shape. There's a few more things we need to do, but you can kind of start to see this thing coming in and making that ear shape a bit. But we have an n-gon here. So an n-gon is a face that has more than 4 sides on the inside. And so the best way to fix n-gons most of the time is using the multi-cut tool and kind of drawing in shapes manually. So I'm just going to draw this in, and it's okay if I end up with a triangle in here. If you don't want a triangle, you can also, well, let's just see if we can do this without getting a triangle. So in Objects Mode, I'll select Multi-Cut. And again, I'm going to, using the multi-cut tool, I'm going to draw it in manually. So I'm going to start on a vertex and then draw it over to another vertex to make one quad at a time. So I'll start from left to right. So I dragged on that vertex, or I clicked on that vertex, then went over here and clicked on that vertex, and then I press return. So I made that. And then I'll do the multi-cut tool again here. So I'll select that vertex, and I'll drag up here. Make sure that it's clicking right on the vertex, and the vertex shows up as red before you click it. If you draw it on a line right here, it's going to make a 5-sided face. Do you see how that would happen there? So just make sure that the vertex area glows up red. Press return, and we almost got it. And so I have what looks like a 5-sided shape up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one thing I could do here, just to kind of sort this out, let's just see if this works. So I'm going to try doing the Insert Edge Loop tool. So I'm just going to add another edge loop in my ear. That's going to be the best way to solve this. So I'll just add an edge loop right there. It'll be nice. It'll fill out the ear a little bit more, especially if I look at it from the side view here. I'll just kind of double check my work. And I might even this out a little bit. It's kind of clumping together a little bit right now. So I'll just pull this up a little. Okay, so I added, I was ending up with a 5-sided face, so I was going to end up with a tri in there, and it's fine if you end up with a tri in the inner ear. It's definitely not going to matter that much, but I just saw an easy opportunity to get this to be all quads by just adding this edge loop right there. And so now when I use the multi-cut tool, I can just click on that vertex, make sure the vertex glows up red, bring it to this vertex right here, make sure it's red, and press return. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 faces on that inner ear and no triangles or n-gons. So that's that part of the ear. And we're going to do a similar thing here for this lower earlobe. And let me just look at this a little bit. I'm going to feel the ear for a moment. So I want a little bit of this earlobe to show up. So I'm going to do one more edge loop. Actually, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. Press Control. I'm going to draw it in right there. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did up here to kind of create this inner shape. And so I'm just going to press Q and edge and just double click it to get that whole edge loop. Make sure the whole edge loop gets selected there. And we're just going to extrude and pull it in kind of to make that the main inner ear hole. So extrude, I'm going to guess, and it's again with that edge selected going around there. I'll press the power button and I'm just going to do the red arrow to pull it in a little bit. And I'll use this, and then actually from there I'll just press Q, get out of the extrude tool. So all I did was I extruded it in world mode and then just pushed it inwards. And so from here I'm going to just scale this thing in a little bit. And it's going to be a little tricky in here. I'm actually going to flatten this. You see how it's got like some 3 dimensions to it? It's going to be easier to work with if I flatten it. And so the way to flatten it here is I'm just going to take this green box right here and then drag it from right to left. You see how it just flattened the edge, and then I'll press W, or the move tool, and drag it back. So if we look at it from the front view, you can see here better what I just did. So it's kind of going all over the place right now. It's throwing me off. And so I'm going to do the scale tool, and then I'm just going to drag this one, drag it right to left, and it flattens the whole thing. Then I'll press W and pull it back out here so I can just kind of see what I'm doing a little bit better, because it can get a little confusing. And so from here, I have some overlapping faces happening here. So I'm just going to, using the edge tool, I'm just going to try to pull these away from each other so that they're not overlapping anymore. You see how I did that? It was kind of looking like that before. So just selected that edge, moved it. Select this edge right here, move it out. Just try to get this thing so it's not overlapping. You shouldn't have to do too much work here. So if you find yourself dragging vertices for too long, it might be a sign that you know, it got overthought here for a second, or you know, something like that. So I have that edge loop drawn in like that. So we have the ear looking like this now. I'll press 3. You can kind of see what's happening there a little bit. Press 1 again to kind of bring it back to normal mode. So I just kind of did that extrusion of that edge. I might select that edge loop again now that I have it kind of cleaned up. And I'll use the rotate tool, and I'll rotate the whole edge at once with the red rotate slider. Just rotate it in a little bit, because the ear, it goes in, but also goes, if you're looking at it from this view, it goes into the left here. So I'm just going to start that rotation to kind of get the vertices bending that way. So got it shaped there, and then with that whole edge selected, I'm going to do another edge loop of this edge. Or sorry, another extrusion of this edge loop. And here, let's see if local mode, I want local mode to work, but it's just not working for me right now. So I'll press the power button to bring it into world view and just pull it out, and it'll come straight out cleanly, which will be nice here. So all I'm doing is, with that edge loop selected, I'm just pressing this power button right here to bring it so it goes from vertical to left to right there. And then I'm just going to grab what for me is the red arrow on the extrude tool, just to pull it inwards, inwards towards the rest of the head, and press Q to get out of that. And so from here, I'm going to rotate this again, and I'm going to pull it this way so that it just kind of goes back in towards the head some. And I'm going to scale it all so that it gets smaller. You see how I'm pulling that in that way? And once I have that, that's good. And so from here, it's just a matter of closing it off and getting it watertight again. So what I might do here, I'm gonna use the scale tool. I'm gonna do that green arrow trick I did again. So I'm just gonna do green arrow, or sorry, the green scale box right here. So again, once I shape that, and it's kind of making this shape right here, I'll press R on my keyboard, or the scale button right here. And then the scale box that goes from left to right, I'm just going to drag it from right to left, and I'll flatten it out right there. So again, if you look at it from the front view, you'll see what that's doing. So the edge is kind of curving around like that, and I'm just going to drag the scale tool right to left, and it just pops it straight into a straight line there. And you don't need to do that, but it's just, I don't know, it's just helps me to mentally stay organized here. So it's up to you what you want to do there. So with that edge loop selected there, I will press the bridge button and see if this will close the gap for me. All right, so that didn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shape this a little bit. When it doesn't work like that, it just means that Maya's having trouble computing how one edge could be facing another, and it just can't quite do the bridge function for us at that point. So what helps a lot here is to just even out the spacing of the edges. So I'm just kind of going around, again, kind of clockwise here. And I'm just trying to even out the distance from one vertex to the next. And sometimes that helps Maya put together which edge should be facing which. So again, it's this edge loop. Again, if you select the edge loop and you press F, it makes it so that when you rotate your camera, it stays focused on it, which is nice. So let's try that again and see if that helped it. You see there? It just kind of, I just took the vertices that were really clumped together before and I just spread them out a little bit, and now the bridge tool works for me. Let me just make sure that no weird artifacts happen there. Okay, that's just my imagination. So I close this off. This is an N-gon that we have again here, so we're going to use the multi-cut tool to turn this into either quads or triangles. Hopefully quads, but if there's a triangle in here, no one's ever going to see it because it's way down in the inner ear, unless you're doing a medical animation. So multi-cut, and I'll just go from top to bottom. So I'll make sure the vertex here lights up red, and then 1, 2, 3, want it to make 4 faces there. So I made sure that lit up red, and then press return. I'm just going to go from top to bottom. So make sure this vertex lights up red, and that one. Press return. Red vertex. Make sure it's a red vertex, then press return. And it looks like I'm going to end up with one triangle with this thing. And just, you know, I might make the triangle there. So again, red vertex or red vertex. Oops. So there, I think I drew it, and I saw like a double dot happen. So just be careful to make sure that, because this can mess up on you real quick, just to make sure that no funny business shows up. You know, it's like one red vertex, and then you press return. So I ended up with one triangle in here, but it's way down into the inner ear. No one will ever notice. So, except for anyone watching this tutorial, obviously. So from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna look at this model a little bit. And okay, so what the next thing I want to do here is, this is like mostly done at this point, which is great. If I press 3, you can kind of see the shape of the ear forming pretty well. The earlobe here is still a little too connected for my taste to the big lobe where my cursor is right here. So I'll press 1. And so the solve that I do for that is I right click and go to face mode, and I select these faces and I extrude them right there. So those faces right there, I'll press extrude, and here I'm going to do, let me just try out a few of these. Okay, so for my instance, I'm in local mode, and then the green box, if I pull it in a little bit, let's try, Maya's making this hard on me. We're going to extrude this, and the idea is just to add some topology into this thing. It's kind of like what we did with the nostril. Okay, so I used the local mode, and I just used the green box and then the yellow box. And I just kind of went back and forth a little bit. And then I'm going to use, just to kind of scale it in from that original edge. So it looked like that initially, and so I did the green box in, red box in. You see how if I did both equally, it kind of brought that whole edge loop in a bit. And then I'll just do the blue arrow just to extrude it back out. there a little bit. I'll go to objects mode. And that helps a lot in separating out this earlobe from that shape. So you can see there that that earlobe's starting to kind of form, which is great. So that's really helpful. There's also like a little dimple that happens in here. If we look at it from the side view, and I'll hide my ear, there's like a dimple that happens right there. So we could do another extrusion to kind of get that topology going and start forming that. So I'll unhide my ear and I'm going to save it so I don't lose any work in case something bad happens here. And so to create that dimple, I'm just going to do extrude 2 more faces. So I'll select those 2 faces right there. And again, I'm kind of using my reference image. And I'll extrude. I'll do the same thing that I did before with the last extrude, where I just use the green box to scale it in some, red box to scale it in some. And this time, I'll use the blue arrow to push it inward. And from here, I might need to grab this edge, right click an edge, bring that inward as well to kind of go along with it. I think I went a little too over the top with that though. I need to go into Vertex Mode and do this one vertex at a time. Just trying to flatten it out in this section. So that starts the shape right there. If I do the turn off my wireframe, you can see that dimple starting to form. It's a little square right now, so if I add another edge loop in there, I could round it out some. And I might just go ahead and try that, see what happens. So once I smooth this, I think that's the time where I'm going to kind of create that shape where it kind of, I de-square it a little bit, because this is making an n-gon, and the writing's on the wall that edge flow kind of won't work well for me here. So I'm gonna save that for a later modeling stage to kind of round that out some. So moving ahead with this thing, let me just preview it smooth again. Okay, that's pretty good, I think. And so before I add any more geometry to this thing, I'm just gonna work on making it more 3D and connecting it to the rest of the head here. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to go into edge mode, and what I might also wanna do is turn on the rest of my model again. So I'll select it in the outliner, press H to bring it back. And this whole ear, oops. So on my main model, I'm just trying to get this edge loop right here just to match up with my ear a little bit better. Oh, whoops. So I'll do a drag and select. Just do a little work here to get it working on both sides. Something else I might do is, this is a pretty tricky operation, getting the ear connected back to the head. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this tutorial, and I'll make that the next tutorial here. So I'm going to divide this into 2 pieces. And I'll show connecting one object to another object. And so just kind of, if you followed along this far, that'll be up on the next tutorial. and I'll see you then.